Howdy, and welcome to the F1 Hatchet, and welcome to my Monaco post-race reaction. What was your thoughts on this race? Did you think that mandatory 2 pit stop strategy was going to help out with this race? Did it help out with this race? Did it just delay things, pushing people back into the pack so that it makes it a little bit slower and a little bit more dull? Or to give you that pit stop strategy, information that you wanted to kind of shake things up? For me, it didn't really play out that well. I mean, maybe just because we had a couple of teams that were next to each other and they were like just backing each other up, getting those pit stops in while backing up the field and then carrying on. And so it kind of just made it really slow on those back packs. And the front pack, actually, you did get a little bit more pressure on that front pack, but did it really play out? No, but of course we didn't have all of the full safety car aspects of it either, like we normally do. So what was your thoughts? I almost think it was too much. Didn't help, but maybe it was just this one time. So maybe we need to try it one more time to see how it plays out again and see if that helps out. I'm worried though that if you had some, safety car issues in this race, it would just take advantage of those. And so depending on where those played out, the teams that were roughly in that sync would get that extra pit stop for free. And so you would just lose out on that, pit stop strategy as well. So that was kind of what was playing out in my head when I was watching this race. But what did you think? Just like normal, we'll go from the back of the pack to the front of the pack, going through each driver, giving my thoughts on those drivers and telling you what happened to those drivers if I know what happened to them during the race. So we'll start off with Pierre Gasly, who started off in 17th and ended up in 20th. He had a DNF after he hit Yuki Tsunoda and tore that front left tire almost completely off on lap 9, around around turn 10. He did make it back to the pits on that tire, which may or may not have been the case because that car was pretty beat up. But he didn't seem to get penalized for that, as far as I'm aware. So we will have to wait and see if that comes to play after the race. He did gain 1 spot on the very first lap before that all happened and played out. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of mistake, I think, on Pierre Gasly's fault, and he kind of hit the back of Yuki. He was on the radio about saying no brakes, but I'm not sure if that was because of that incident or that was before the incident, which caused the incident about having no brakes. It seemed like he was braking a little bit, before he hit Yuki, so that kind of makes me think it was after that fact, but I could be wrong. And then we come to Fernando Alonso, who started off in 6th and ended up in 19th. He again had DNF on lap 38 when his power supply unit kind of gave up and he started smoking that engine, and he was able to pull off to the side and not cause any issues. We had Pierre Gasly that had, kept the yellow flag going, but didn't really cause anything else besides the yellow flag. Fernando Alonso, I don't think he even caused a yellow flag, maybe a yellow flag in that instance momentarily, but it was very quick if there was a yellow flag for him. And then we come to the back runners. We come to Kimi Antonelli, who started off in 15th and ended up in 18th. He gained 1 spot on the very first lap. He had a 2-stop strategy like most people, but he stopped pretty late in the game, stopping on lap 69, switching from a set of hards to a set of mediums, and then going a couple of laps to lap 71 before switching from those mediums to another set of hards. He did pass Albon for 12th, going off the track around lap 54, but then gave it back, and that was basically the main action that Kimi Antonelli had. He was kind of stuck behind his teammate and Albon for most of the race. Yuki Tsunoda started off in 12th and ended up in 17th. He lost a spot in the very first lap. He did a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 1, switching from a set of softs to a set of hards, and then going fairly long on that set of hards to lap 73 before switching to another set of mediums. And unfortunately, that strategy did not really play off for Yuki Tsunoda in this running and pushed him back down into that 17th spot. I think if he would have tried to gone long, like a couple other people, it would have helped him out a little bit more. But hindsight's always 20/20. Otherwise, I think Yuki did a decent job. It just wasn't quite the strategy they wanted. And of course, qualifying didn't play out for him to really play games with Max Verstappen in the mix for the rest of those drivers, like some of the other teams played. We come to Nico Hulkenberg, who started off in 13th and ended up in 16th. He gained a spot on the very first lap, had a two-stop strategy, stopping on lap 12, switching from a set of mediums to a set of hards, then going to lap 44 on those set of hards before switching to another set of mediums. And then we come to Lance Stroll, who lost he got penalized one spot for causing a collision during free practice, and then he had another 3-spot penalty for impeding during qualifying. So he had 4 spots that he got dropped back down from the qualifying session, making him start off in that 19th spot and ended up in 15th. He did gain 1 spot at the very first lap. He had a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 17 from a set of hards to another set of hards, and going to lap 64 in the set of hards to switching to a set of mediums. He did pass Hulkenberg on for 15th place on lap 77, going off track and having to give that spot back. And then, of course, on the very next lap, the very last lap of the actual race, he did pass Hulkenberg for that 16th spot on that lap 78. So that's kind of a mixture there for him, switching back and forth on that very last, gaining that spot that he ended up in for that 15th spot. Then we come to Gabriel Bortoleto, who started off in 16th and ended up in 14th. He lost 4 spots on the very first lap when he had that issue running into the wall. He did a 3-stop strategy, stopping at lap 1, switching from a set of mediums to a set of hards and gaining that front wing back. Then he stopped on lap 26, switching from that set of hards to another set of softs, and going to lap 35 on that set of softs before switching back to a set of mediums. He did pass Kimi on that very first lap, but then kind of got squeezed out on that first lap and ended up in the wall, but it was able to recover that car and bring it back to the pits, even though his front wing was left on the circuit, which caused a virtual safety car. So that made him lose those first 4 spots during that first lap, and then otherwise he kind of stayed at the back of the pack, kind of running where he could in that line. Then we get to Franco Colapinto, who started off in 18th and ended up in 13th. He gained 1 spot on the very first lap, and again, he was just kind of maintained that position throughout the rest of the race. Then we come to Oliver Behrman, who had a 10-spot penalty for overtaking under a red flag in practice 2. And he started in 20th because of that and ended up in 12th. So a fairly good recovery for them on that strategy per se. He had 1 spot that he gained on the very first lap because of Gabriel running into the wall and getting behind him. He did a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 1, switching from a set of mediums to a set of hards, and then going to lap 17 and switching back to a set of mediums and going the rest of the way on that set of mediums. His first pit stop was also a very bad pit stop where their front tires were having some issues getting off of that car, and that kind of played into that aspect as well, but he was able to kind of recover from that. And when he was getting back out on the track, I thought this was kind of interesting, showing the rest of the field, as he had a 5-second, speed advantage over the other people on track on lap 7 when he was trying to come back from that first pit stop, going through, catching back up to the rest of the field as everybody else was trying to back everybody else up. He was able to really push it, and that was kind of interesting and kind of a foretelling for the rest of the race as we kind of see how things played out. So we get George Russell, who started off in 14th and ended up in 11th. He had a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 62, switching from a set of hards to a set of mediums, and then going to lap 68 on a set of mediums before switching to another set of hards. He did pass Albon for 10th on lap 50, kind of going off track, claiming that it was a kind of an advantage because of dangerous driving. Still kind of decided to take the penalty because he was really kind of pissed off at driving so slowly behind Albon. They gave him a penalty instead of a time second penalty. They gave him a drive-through penalty. But even with that, gaining that speed that he needed, he still was able to come back out on track in front of Albon after doing that drive-through penalty, and only dropping back behind Albon when he had to go pit for his real pit stop. So it did hurt him, but it was still kind of weird to me that he was able to get back out on track after doing a drive-through and still be in the lead. So that kind of shows you the frustration that he was having of driving really slow behind Albon, doing those team strategies of getting Sainz the ability to do pit stops, in that window, like the Racing Bulls did as well. And I think a couple other ones were trying to do that. But backing up the field in that regard really put some issues on some of the back drivers and trying to figure out where they go. I know Kimi Antonelli actually did this for George Russell a little bit later, but in that regard, that's not really what we're looking to see in the race, I think. I think we're trying to look for actually racing, not just the strategy, in the rule set of pushing and backing up drivers, keeping those lanes open for their teammates. Now, because it's Monaco, there wasn't the ability to really pass. You'd have to really have a good instance to be able to pass the people in front of you. And since their cars were fairly on par with each other, it made it hard to do that because they could slow down in the corners that were hard to pass and then speed up in the corners that were more the threat to being passed, and kind of keep them in that defensive position and back them up, getting that big gaps in those ranks. So I think George has a point, but it was outside the boundaries, and so he gained that advantage. It didn't really hurt him in the say that he still was out in front. So we may have to think that through. I know they were thinking about maybe giving him another time penalty on top of that, but I don't think that was necessarily the case. I think we just need to figure out a better method for this race in regards, because if you were at a different track, you probably wouldn't be able to back them up quite near as much because, would be allowing more opportunities to pass. And so you'd have to be super, defensive and super really good at blocking people in that regard and keeping in the rules on that instead of this race, which is so narrow. So I think George Russell did a good job. He was frustrated. He kind of took on his own hands and tried to pull through. And I've seen that before, okay, we made the mistake. I'm just going to take the time because I have the clean air to make the time, and so the penalty doesn't count. And so I think those are the instances where you have to go back and look at those issues. This gets us to the top 10, where we really see, the two teams that were really putting pressure on the rest of the back of the field by backing them up. So we have the Williams. So we have Carlos Sainz in that 10th position, who started off in 11th position, but made it up to 10th, having a two-stop strategy, stopping on lap 48, switching from a set of hards to a set of mediums, and then going to lap 53, switching to another set of mediums. And he swapped spots with Albon on lap 44 for that 9th position so that he could, get those pit stops in. And then once that was done, he swapped back with his teammate, who was actually in the lead at the time between the two drivers. So we give him to Alex Albon, who started off in 10th and ended up in 9th. Had a two-stop strategy, stopping on lap 32, switching from a set of mediums to another set of mediums, and then going to lap 40, switching to another set of to a set of hards. He did swap spots, as I said, with Sainz on lap 67 for that 9th position to get back in the running order and getting those double points for Williams. Then we come to Liam Lawson, who started off in 9th and ended up in 8th. He had a two-stop strategy, stopping on lap 31, switching from a set of mediums to a set of softs, and then going to lap 40 on the set of softs before switching to a set of hards where he took it home. And he's the other person that really backed up the field for his teammate Isaac Hydjar so that he could get those pit stop strategies in and get back in the lead and get the most points for the Racing Bulls. So I think Liam Lawson did a really good job, and being able to keep it into the points as well was a bonus for him. Gain points in that regard, but doing all the team orders, not really taking it on himself to try to push forward as much as he probably wanted to overall. Then we come to Esteban Ocon, who I think I did really good, getting up into that spot to start off with, starting off in 8th spot from qualifying, and ended up in 7th spot, had a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 16 from a set of mediums to another set of mediums, and then going to lap 28 on that set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, and then going the rest of the way. And again, that comes back down to that qualifying for Esteban Ocon to be able to get up into that Q3 section and start off into that 8th spot, and then gaining that extra position due to attrition in this race. So he did a really good job, I think, overall, keeping it, in between the lines, not making any mistakes, even though the whole field was kind of getting backed up, not making those mistakes so other people could, potentially get around him in those situations. Then we come to Isaac Haijar, who started off in 5th and ended up in 6th. He again had a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 14, switching from mediums to a set of softs, and then going to lap 19 on those set of softs before switching to a set of hards. He did an excellent job in qualifying again to get up into that 5th spot. Unfortunately, he did lose 1 spot in this race overall, but was able to maintain that and still get really good points in that Racing Bull. So I think Isaac Haijar is doing an excellent job this season, as a rookie especially, in this realm. So we'll have to wait and see how he can really gather himself in this rest of the season to see if he can really push himself farther up in that driver's standing. This gets us to the top 5, where we have Lewis Hamilton, who's out kind of on his own for the most part. He did have a 3-spot penalty for impeding in qualifying, where he kind of blocked, Max Verstappen in the qualifying session. He actually ended up apologizing for that after that qualifying session, going up to Max. And I know Max was kind of upset about that, but he was able to make up some of those spots during the race, starting off in 7th and ended up in 5th, but still quite a bit farther back behind Max overall in this strategy. He did a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 18 from a set of mediums to a set of hards, going to lap 56 on those set of hards before switching back to a set of mediums. And at one point, he was asking his engineer if he was 1 minute behind the people in front of him. He wasn't quite that far back, but pretty close to that. So I know he was kind of frustrated in that regard. But even though that, I think Lewis did a decent job in this race overall, trying to keep the strategies down and doing his own race to get some points on the board, doing fairly well overall. Then we come to Max Verstappen, who started off in 4th and ended up in 4th. He had a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 28, switching from a set of hards to a set of mediums, and then going to lap 77 on those set of mediums before switching to a set of softs. Now, I think Max basically did everything he could. I think there were the whole race. The problem is that they couldn't pass easily on track, and so he was trying to go long, trying to wait for those red flags or some other issues that he could actually take advantage of on that set of mediums that never came, and so he had to actually then pit on that lap 77 to switch to a set of softs to see if he could gain any ground with those soft tires on that last lap, but unfortunately he was not able to really take advantage of that. And so it was just kind of played out in that regard, kind of against him, even though he did an excellent job in this race, putting pressure on the front runners for the most part for the whole race, even though he really wasn't in contention due to the way this track is overall. Then we come to Oscar Piastri, who started off in 3rd and ended up in 3rd. He had a 2-stop strategy again, mandatory, stopping on lap 20, switching from mediums to a set of hards, and then switching on lap 48 from that set of hards to another set of hards. And he was able to gain some ground and put a little bit of pressure on Charles Leclerc, but not quite as much as I know Lando was wanting him to do. But he was kind of running his own race, not getting into that dirty air and messing things up as well. So I think he knew kind of the position he was in and was able to help out his teammate throughout this race in that regard, putting the strategy on Leclerc's defensive positions, making him stop and not be able to undercut or overcut Lando in the strategy side of things, as he might be missing up and putting himself into that third position behind Oscar. So that was kind of Oscar's play here, was on the team front, just to kind of keep Charles Leclerc more honest, not being able to take advantage of the situations against Lando. And then we come to Charles Leclerc, who started off in second, ended up in second. He did a two-stop strategy, stopping on lap 22 for set of hards from a set of mediums, and then going to lap 49 on those set of hards before switching back to a set of mediums. He had a really good start, almost taking the lead on the first corner, first lap, but just didn't quite make it there, where Lando was able to keep ahead of him. He is also voted the driver of the day. In my regard, that's not really the driver of the day, even though I know it's his home race. He did decently in this race, but I wouldn't call him the driver of the day material. I would probably give it to people like Liam Lawson, who was able to, one of the first people to back up the field in regard to keep his teammate, in the running up front due to those pit stops that were mandatory, and just kind of put that pressure and then still maintain the points that he got as well. So I think Lando was great, keeping in the lead. So, he's always an option from getting the qualifying session, dealing with the pressure, even though there was some weird circumstances. So you could give it to him. You could give it to Liam. You could give it to Alexander Albon, in the sense that he was able to swap spots with his teammate so that his teammate could get those those pit stops in and not lose too many positions himself to keep Williams in the double point range. So there's a couple of options there. Who would you give the driver of the day if it wasn't going to go to Charles Leclerc? If you do like Charles Leclerc, give me a good reason why you think that driver of the day goes to him. I know he did put a little bit of pressure on Lando, but to me, he just didn't quite get there to be the driver of the day. He did an excellent job, keeping it, almost on qualifying, almost the pole position, and then putting pressure on Lando for most of the race, keeping him honest, not having to make those mistakes. If he did, he would have lost the race, but still not quite where I would have, ranked driver of the day at. And this leads us to Lando Norris, who started off in first and ended up in first. He had two-stop strategy, stopping on lap 19 from a set of mediums to a set of hards, and going to lap 50 on that set of hards to switch to another set of hards. He kept the lead on the very first corner lap, but was able to lock up those tires, so he kind of almost bit it himself, not doing as well as he probably could have on that very start, but was able to maintain that lead, which gave him the rest of the field behind him for the rest of this track. So it's a good job for him, even though he could probably tweak it and do a little bit better at the beginning. He did enough to maintain that first position, and due to the strategies, maintain that throughout this race for the most part. And show you how this went down. We basically have Lando managing to keep the lead on that first lap. Then we had the virtual safety car come out on lap 2, then went to lap 4 due to Borletto hitting the wall and having his wing come off on turn 8. And then lap 5, we basically had a 0.85 second lead for Lando over Leclerc. By lap 10, it was about the same, about 0.77 second lead for Lando over Leclerc. 15, it was up to a 2.09 second lead for Lando over Charles Leclerc. Lap 30 was a 3.7 second lead for Lando over Leclerc. And just over halfway, you can say, it was on lap 40, it was 3.9 second lead for Lando over Charles Leclerc. Lap 60, we had the change because of pit strategy, where at lap 60, we had a 1.4 second lead for Max over Lando, where Max needed a pit one more time. And of course, by the end, even though Max was backing up the field, for Lando, pushing him into, Charles Leclerc and Oscar, he was able to take off on that very last lap after afterwards and still gain a 3.1 second lead over Charles Leclerc on that very last lap. So I think, Lando had an excellent machine, managed it really well. I know there was some pressure when, throughout this race and different points for him to either maintain the lead or, get back and not really make mistakes when Max was putting pressure, backing them up a little bit more into the back of the other drivers to potentially cause a mistake and, give Max a chance to win out overall. So I think Lando did an excellent job. I think Charles Leclerc did a great job. Oscar did what he needed to do to, keep into the team players and get that third position. Max did everything he could to elevate himself farther up in this grid, but it just didn't play out for him. And then, of course, Lewis in that back five was doing a good job of recovering those positions, but was farther enough back that it really didn't matter how that played out past that. So he really didn't, put any pressure directly on the top four, but was able to maintain that top five. So Lando also got the fastest lap on that very fast last lap, where he was let loose after Max Verstappen had to pit for that second time to get to those soft tires. So great job for Lando Norris and show what he can do and not make mistakes going slow or recovering and doing that fast at the end when he didn't necessarily have to do that, but just maintain the lead. Yeah, for the driver standing, we basically see Liam Lawson gaining his first points for the season, jumping up to that 17th position above the drivers who have not scored yet. Now with 4 points, so now he's on the board. And then basically we see Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, Carlos Sainz, and Lance Stroll dropping back a spot as Isaac Hydjar jumped up to 10th spot, now with 15 points. Now Carlos Sainz did gain a point, but he did not change positions in this regard. And then everything else pretty much stays the same until we get, we still have Oscar at the very first with 161 points. Now just with a 3-point lead over his teammate, Lando Norris, now with 158. So we'll have to watch and see how that battle ends up throughout this season, where those are coming together on regard. Of course, Max Verstappen still catching up a little bit with 136 points. George maintaining the same. Charles Leclerc gaining some points in the 5th position. So you have to watch those areas as well. But the big winner here is Isaac Hydjar, who jumped into 10th, and Liam Lawson now getting on the board. So did this do anything to the constructor standings? It did. So we have Racing Bulls actually jumping over Aston Martin for that 7th position, now with 22, popping over from those 10 points that they used to have. So Aston Martin failing to score, keeping that 14 points, dropping back to 8th spot. But what I think is kind of fascinating here is even though we have Williams still maintaining that 5th position fairly strongly, we have the first front 4 runners really close together in regards to their battle. I think we have where Ferrari's at 142, just 1 point behind Red Bull, who now has 143, gaining on Mercedes, who still has 147. So we have that big battle for 2nd spot, potentially gaining, putting pressure on the McLarens with 319. So the big issue there, I think, is who's going to take 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in the constructor standings at this point. So what's coming up next? We have Spain, or Barcelona Catalonia, which is going to have a length of 2.894 miles with 66 laps being run for a total race distance of 190.908 miles. It was first introduced in 1991 and has a lap record of 1.16.33 seconds for Max Verstappen in 2023. And again, this is going to be held on June 1st, so basically next weekend, so be aware of that. I want to take this time to thank those people who have made it this far in watching my videos, and again, another thanks and a great thanks for if you liked the video and subscribed. I appreciate that so much. So until then, farewell, and I'll see you on the grid.